Hi everyone and welcome to another Sims 3 speed build video in Majestic Valley. Today I have a couple of renovations for you. I have the consignment store and the community grounds that are getting a much needed makeover now that I have enough money in the treasury to actually do some decent builds for the community at least. So I was really looking forward to doing these. And let me tell you, it was a huge nightmare, particularly with the consignment store build. And that was because my game was, I don't know what it was, but I was experiencing severe lag to the point where I tried to do the consignment store, and the end result that I got with all the lag was just not very good. I wasn't happy with it, and that was mainly just because I was just trying to do stuff and the lag was so severe that the end result just I wasn't pleased with it. So I did some tinkering with my game, and I tried, just reinstalling a few fixes, taking out some custom content that I don't use, um, lots of various things. I don't even know if it really made a difference. I kind of just dealt with it in the end, but I built the shell that you're seeing here. I even furnished it. I don't show me furnishing it and, all the interior design and all that, because in the end I ended up just starting again. I came back and revisited the lot the next day and was just like, we're just going to start afresh with a mindset that this is going to be laggy. And I think it's just because I've been building in The Sims 2 and I don't get any lag in The Sims 2. The Sims 2 is its own thing in itself. There's issues with building in The Sims 2 if you have a lot of custom content with pink flashing and crashing and all that stuff. So I'm not saying The Sims 2 is perfect, but I don't experience lag in that game when I'm building. So to come into The Sims 3, I guess I hadn't built in The Sims 3 for a while, and so I wasn't really prepared for it. But yeah, in the end, I got there and I'm happy with the overall result. I imagine that the building would, because I'm playing this world over a period of time, so I imagine that the shell that I do build may end up changing, here and there. I do tend to adjust my builds as I play the game, so the final result, who knows, a few sim years down the line it will change a little bit. But the final shell that you see here is not what I end up going with. It's very long, so I shrunk it down a little bit, and I wanted to add some height to it. So the initial roof, you would have seen it was I believe it's called a hipped roof, was just in the center of the building, and I didn't quite like that. And I wanted to have some real prominence to the front of the building. And so I added just a raised area at the top that made the building look a little more kind of dominant, compared to the other buildings in the world right now. So yeah, this is basically the first part of the build where I built that initial shell. Was the first time I built this, built the consignment store, and then this part is when I kind of had a sleep and came back to it the next day and started, pretty much working on it again. But yeah, what I wanted to do here was I wanted to have a bit of height, and obviously you can see I've put a cornice on the shell, on the previous shell. I can't remember if I've done it in this shell yet. Yes, I had put a cornice on previously, so I just had to go back and stop the recording and check whether I'd actually put the cornice on. But here I am putting it on again. Initially, it wraps around this entire section of the roof, but again, I wasn't quite happy with the height. I wanted it to be a little bit taller. So what I did was I added another level onto the freeze level. So there's a freeze level. So it's essentially the ground floor, ground floor, the second floor, the freeze level, and then another freeze level to have the cornice on there. So it ends up being quite I wouldn't say imposing, but it definitely has some height to it, which I really like. I'm happy that I'm able to start building these types of buildings in the world now that there's a decent economy. But yeah, so this second time around that I built this building, I just, yeah, was much more happy with the result. I also spent more time looking at reference photos of kind of Victorian interior design, and whereas in the previous build I was just so frustrated by the lag that I just kind of was just winging it. Whereas with this build I looked at a lot more reference pictures to get ideas of color schemes and furniture and the placement of objects and that kind of thing. So yeah, I have cut out a majority of the time that was spent waiting for the game to just load. And yeah, it really, the most annoying thing is creator style. Creator style is just, it was giving me the most lag. Um, and I was having to do that thing where you switch between build and buy mode to get rid of it, and then, but as soon as you go back into creator style, the lag comes back. But alas, I love this game so much, so I'm just happy to deal with it and soldier on. um, but yeah, so on the right hand side of the building, there is a bit of an extended part that I shrink in a little bit because the the white trim around the siding, I realized that it didn't kind of frame the building very well as it is right now. Like the building is quite symmetrical at the front. It's not very symmetrical at the back, but the front is quite symmetrical. However, the trim around the siding didn't line up with the frame of the building. So here I am fixing that so that it is more symmetrical at the front. So bringing in the walls a little bit and just making way for, yeah, some more space at the back. Bringing in the walls at the front, making more space at the back. The other issue that I had was with the pets kind of wall texture that I used here. And the issue is that the wall texture with no trim, I couldn't get the wood tones to match. Like they were mismatched in color. So then I had to go and download a custom version of it or some add-ons and, use those instead of the EA versions because, yeah, the texture just was not matching, and it was really frustrating as well. So yeah, a lot of challenges with this build, but I'll stop talking about that now because it is almost making me a little upset just thinking about all the trouble I went to. But yeah, now I'm working on the interior, and this was fun to put together because not only did I want this to be a consignment store, I also wanted it to be a place for Sims in the community to have somewhere to go that wasn't their home, that was also enclosed. Because at the moment, the only community lot is the park, and when it rains or the weather's really bad, no one really goes to the park. So I wanted another space for Sims to come and hang out when they didn't want to be at home. And maybe the weather was bad or something. So I created like a little almost like a lounge with, some fun objects and bits and pieces for Sims to do. And yeah, so it's kind of a multi-function building with the consignment store and yeah, just this kind of lounge room here. And I've play tested it and it works really well, and I'm overall pleased with how everything's gone with it. It's quite fun to play in, to be honest. You'll see when I start furnishing it just the type of objects that I put in. It almost reminds me of like a mini library, but it's very small, but kind of has a similar purpose or function. Now the upstairs floor plan I don't even bother with. I don't decorate this at all. I even use the hidden room markers and the skip level markers in the upstairs portions because I don't really have any plans to use them, and if I can avoid furnishing them and decorating them, to save on resources, memory and all that kind of stuff, then I will not decorate them. And that's fine with me. I mean, overall, I just wanted the building to look good. I wasn't too worried about, making every single part of the build playable or anything like that. I just wanted a nice, good looking consignment store with consignment functionality, of course, and a space for Sims in the community to hang out. So now I've got the floor plan all laid out. I'm going and laying in the floor textures, and I go with a nice parquet floor in the entryway here. And of course, I had to look at a lot of reference pictures. Oh, I think I'm getting some lag here. Yeah, I tried to cut out a majority of the lag, but I mean, a little bit of it is still in there. But yeah, I was looking at a lot of reference photos for color schemes and all that. Um, and Victorian builds tend to be Victorian interior design. I think I've said in previous kind of build videos or whatever that the colors tend to be quite quirky, bold. The woods are very can be quite orange. So I did kind of try to emulate that as best as I could. So with the tile in the consignment store section of the build here, I give it this kind of funky little pattern with a nice dark green tone and dark green and cream tone. And I tried to add that to the walls. It wasn't really going the way I wanted it to, but I just kind of dealt with it. And, I'm just kind of saying that, imagining in my own mind that this terrible color scheme that I've put together is historically accurate, even though it may not be. I don't know. I'm just trying to make excuses for myself, I think. So yeah, just getting these color schemes together, and with the countertops, again, I was just looking at reference pictures. So the wood tone here ends up being a bit orange, but ultimately I feel like it ends up being quite cohesive. So it's not like something that you might see in modern day times, or you might see it in, historical buildings or something like that. But in the end, I feel like it all kind of comes together quite nicely. With the consignment store, I do tend to decorate them kind of almost like curious shops. They've got like lots of knickknacks and odds and ends, and I feel like the wacky tiles kind of go with the furnishing that I put in there. So back to the entryway, working on the wall textures here and going with a nice kind of olive green, playing around with different trims as well. And then moving on to the floors in the, I don't even know what to call this room. I'm going to call it the consignment lounge for easy reference. So going with the floors in the consignment lounge, and then just recoloring the trim in the entryway to try and get the wood tones not to match exactly, but to more or less complement each other. So I put in a fireplace there too. I play around a bit with the fireplace because, with the color scheme of the fireplace, because the window frames are white. The exterior of the building is quite light, but the interior ends up being, I wouldn't say dark, mid to dark in terms of tones. And so the white frames, I could recolor them, but I did want the white to kind of creep inside a little bit. So I added some of the white to the fireplace here, but I do play around with it a bit more. And I think the entire fireplace ends up being a muted white. And the frames of the windows, I tone those down a little bit. So there is still a little bit of, whitish color in the space here, but much more toned down. Now I'm just adding in the furniture. So going with a couple of couches, a coffee table, and a domino set, and playing around with the wood tones with the couches here, and the rug. Rugs from the reference photos that I looked at, a lot of them tended to be kind of like Persian style rugs, and I don't have any Persian style rugs in The Sims 3, so I kind of had to make do with what I had to, recolor stuff to almost like they're almost like a knockoff Persian rugs or something. I don't know, but it was the best I could do. The rug at the moment is quite light, but I do end up changing the color of that to be more of a reddy color. With again with reference photos that I was looking at, the colors were very like not bright, but lots of different kind of contrasting colors together in the same room. I thought that was quite cool. I mean, I quite like Victorian interior design, and I'm not saying that I'm the best at emulating it, but I do have fun trying to emulate it somewhat. and I'm quite pleased with how this room here comes together. So here I am recoloring the rug to be more of a reddy color to complement the couches and the chair that I put in the corner. And now I'm just toning down the window frames. But the fireplace, I do come back to that. And now adding in some more kind of detail to the room, so some sideboards, and this is, I guess, where I'm recoloring the fireplace. So yeah, it's more of a ends up being more of a white kind of stone or a grey kind of stone. The entire thing is here. Yeah, look, I just played around with so many different color swatches with it, but yeah, in the end I chose for it to be all white. I actually looked at a reference picture where the entire room was, kind of dark kind of reds, greens, and yellows, dark wood, but the fireplace was just stark white, and I thought that was quite cool. So I did that here in this build. And yeah, just playing around with some other wood tones for the rest of the furniture, just making sure that things look nice and cohesive, but not super matchy-matchy. And adding on some pictures to the walls here. It was quite fun just playing around with all these old pictures and putting them to good use. Adding in a plant there and a candle, but that candle actually changes because I was looking for, obviously, I'm playing in a more or less a historical save, so electricity is not available in my world right now, but it will be at some point in the future. So with the lighting situation, I try and put in lights that look, that they don't run on electricity. So a lot of like lamps and candles and stuff, and that candle that I placed on the sideboard just before, that was kind of the first candle that was in the catalog, and I was like, oh yeah, candle, I'll place that. But then later on, I find one that's actually more kind of historical looking. So yeah, whereas the one that I've placed here, it actually looks a bit too modern. But yeah, when I discovered the other kind of candlestick, I replace the candles in here with that. Also adding in a piano, so a nice space for Sims to come and play piano. I've got a couple of Sims who actually, well, one Sim that I know of for sure that wants to play piano, so now they can actually come to the consignment store or the consignment lounge and play the piano. Just adding some extra detail next to the fireplace here, so some plants and the fireplace little brush and shovel thing, and then adding in those logs as well. I love those logs, and something for the coffee table, so just like a nice tray of books and a vase with flowers in it. Now moving on to furnishing the entryway, and again going with some sideboards to fill out the space here. And initially I chose a couple of sideboards with a couple of mirrors above them, but I wasn't really liking how symmetrical it looked. It just looked a little, too symmetrical for my liking. I do like symmetry sometimes, but I try and avoid it if possible. Like symmetry is, it has its place, but I feel like if it's overdone, then things just look a bit too weird. So now choosing a rug for the entryway, and I do have a lot of trouble with rugs in The Sims 3. I like being able to recolor them and all that stuff, but if I want like a nice patterned Persian rug that where the pattern isn't kind of like a repeating pattern, I don't have many options, so I do struggle with recoloring rugs and not have them look like a big kind of pattern that's been splashed across the floor. But in the end, I feel like the rug pattern that I chose, again, I was trying to emulate like a Persian rug, but I just had to do with the best that I could with what I've got. So that's what ends up being there. Now doing some curtains, and I had a bit of trouble with the placement of these curtains, just with the window being hard against the wall. I don't usually play with windows hard against the wall, but I think I'm just going to have to deal with it in most cases, because sometimes it's necessary in order to have a working floor plan. So, but also have the build look nice from the exterior in terms of windows placement. I do have to make compromises. So I made a compromise in this situation. And when I say hard up against a wall, I actually mean hard up against a corner. I always catch myself out saying the wrong thing. Just honestly, I do take my hat off to people who do voiceovers full time because, yeah, working a full day and then coming home to do a voiceover when I've pretty much been talking all day is very, very hard. So, yeah, I do appreciate other people who do a lot more voiceovers than I do. So now I'm decorating the consignment store interior and putting in, yeah, like I said before, a lot of knickknacks and just kind of odds and ends. These nice mesh kind of curtains and yeah, other details here and there. So there's like a little plant section. That kind of cabinet thing, I think it's has something to do with insects, but I tried placing stuff on there. Nothing could go on there, but I liked the look of it, so I just left it there empty. I feel like it fills up that space quite nicely, but yeah, you can see me here trying to put stuff on it, but nothing would go on it, so just moved on. And yeah, this is when I discovered the other candlestick and went through and replaced the candles that I initially placed down with this one, which I think is much nicer. And then, yeah, putting in a different candlestick. So continuing on with decorating with all the knickknacks and stuff, and it is quite difficult furnishing with a historical save because I have to look through the catalog and make sure that things that I'm placing in there kind of make sense for the time period that I'm playing in. And yeah, so I have a lot of clutter in my catalog, but a lot of it isn't, something that you would see in, I guess, Victorian times. But yeah, now I've pretty much finished with all of the interior of the consignment store, but I've just added a little chair. Oh no, I've still got the bathroom to do as well. No, the bathroom's still coming. But that's not really anything exciting. I mean, it's just a toilet and a sink. I can't imagine that bathrooms back then were really that exciting. But I go with a nice tiled wall and matching tiled floor. And putting in some of those mesh curtains to cover the window there, and then putting in the toilet and doing all the necessary recolors of that toilet and sink. And it also gets a mirror and it gets some lights as well. I don't know if I have footage of me placing the wall kind of candles that I use for this build, but lights do get put in at some stage. I have a really bad habit of forgetting to put lights in my build, and I think I may have done it with this one, and I started playing in it, but then I was like, oh crap, I haven't put any lights in, so I went and put in some wall lights. So rest assured that you may not see any wall lights, but they definitely get put in, and I will find out soon when the screenshots come up. So I'm more or less finished with the interior now, moving on to the exterior landscaping. And yeah, I wanted this to fit in, cohesively with the rest of the world. So using the same terrain paint that I've used around the community grounds or the park, and going in with some dirt terrain paint around the building just so that it looks a little more realistic, and adding in some nice trees around the building as well. I was initially I placed some of the trees that I had been using throughout the world, but I thought that I would kind of switch things up a bit and go with, a couple of magnolias and that plum tree there, just because, this is a building that the rest of the world is essentially like a natural environment, and I wanted this building to be a little, like it's the landscaping, I wanted it to look a little more man-made. So I placed in some trees that aren't anywhere else in the world. So the magnolias and the plum tree to really differentiate the build from the rest of the world. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking behind trees there. I can't believe I've just talked about trees in that much detail, but there you go. Now doing some rocks, and I put in some dandelions as well. I like adding those dandelions in the bushes and around the rocks just to make it look a little more detailed, and adding in a sign too. And that's basically the exterior done, just adding a few more bits and pieces like lights and a chair, and that is pretty much soon anyway, I think. Oh no, going in with some more terrain paint here. And Oh, and I've got to add in the water barrels as well. So this building has plumbing, and at the moment, plumbing in the world is achieved through a well, and water is stored in the barrels. Now, it doesn't really matter for community lots, but for the purpose of consistency and realism, I wanted to place a barrel system there to show that the building does have plumbing. So here's the finished exterior. Very tall or tall-ish building. The rear of it, or the side of it at least. Looking at the interior, the consignment lounge, and now the other side with the Domino's table there. Now we're looking at the entryway, looking through to the consignment shop, and now we are in the consignment store itself. So the next portion of the video is actually a renovation of the park itself, and I was so looking forward to doing this because as much as I love playing the save, this lot was getting really boring to play in. There wasn't much to do, and it was kind of just, yeah, it was very meh. It was, they had the money in the treasury, so I did a renovation for them, so it was very much necessary. Now, the park does end up being quite symmetrical, and I did talk earlier about how I don't particularly like symmetry, but I feel like with parks and, town squares and prominent, buildings of prominence, there is a bit of symmetry, and, so it does have its place, and I feel like the park here is kind of somewhere where I think symmetry would look quite nice. So yeah, just going in here, adding in, all the relevant sections that I'm going, or fencing off all the sections that are going to be, different terrain paints and textures and all that. I don't have a texture for the path that I use in this world, so I had to make my own. But I feel like I got it to match pretty close, so I'm quite pleased with that actually. And it didn't even take me very long. I only spent maybe, I don't know, I'm not even going to guess, but it didn't take long. And the park is actually sectioned off into different kind of spaces. So there's a space for eating, there's a space for the market, there's a space for the well, and there's a couple of spaces for recreation. So, chess, a swing set, and the nub set. Yeah, I couldn't get rid of the nub set. My Sims loved the nub set. Even playtesting this park, my Sims were still just, straight to the nub set. They just loved the nubs. I did kind of border the grassy areas with this fence, but yeah, I didn't stick with that. I felt like it looked a little too sectioned off. I wanted there to be more of a seamless transition between the grass and the pavement and terrain paint. Now just doing the fence, the exterior fence that kind of surrounds or encloses the park. There's one section of it right here that I could not recolor for whatever reason, and I actually forget to come back and recolor it again to have another attempt at recoloring it. So it does stay the default color for the remainder of the build. And when you see the screenshots of the park, you'll notice that it is actually dawn. And that's because I only realized that I couldn't recolor, or that I forgot to recolor the fence when I started editing this footage. So I had to go back into the game and recolor it, but it was morning at the time of me going in to do the recolor. So the screenshots, the after screenshots of the park are at dawn, I'm afraid, but it still looks quite cool. I mean, yeah, I guess it adds to like a moody atmosphere. Anyway, doing the market here and just leveling out the terrain. I had to do a lot of terrain leveling with this park because when it was initially placed, I just placed it freely in the world in game, and so it kind of picked up all the uneven terrain that it was placed onto. And then when I transferred it over to the second iteration of Majestic Valley, which the entire space here is flat, the original terrain levels were kept along with when I transferred the lot over to the new world. So I had to do a lot of terrain fixing. Now, the end result of the park is not going to be the final version of the park. I'm probably going to do more bits and pieces to it as I play the game and the Sims earn more money for the town and I have more money to spend. But basically, this is what I was able to do with the money that I had. It definitely needed to be, revitalized and look more like it fits within the community and its surroundings. So this is what I was able to do with the resources that I have, basically. But I imagine that it will change a little bit more as time progresses in my game to be, a bit more exciting, a few more objects here and there. But yeah, overall, I feel like the way it turns out now is much better than it was before, at least. So again, going in with all the terrain paint, adding in that nice detail and those extra touches to make it look a little more realistic, and adding in some lamps. And I go with the lamps that surround the lot so that it's more consistent with the rest of the world. So placing those in there. And then I move on to some benches and I create a nice little eating spot in one of the corners as well. But you don't end up seeing me place that. I don't even know what's happened to the footage of it. It's kind of disappeared, but you do see it in the screenshots anyway. So it's just a few tables and chairs and a barbecue. So Sims no longer have to eat at the fire pit, which is amazing because whenever I had to play at this park and I wanted other Sims to eat, I was the one that had to light the fire pit so Sims would actually eat. Otherwise, they would leave if they got too hungry. But now, if they're hungry, they can go and cook themselves. So now, yeah, just with the detail around the market here. So I wanted the market to look a little more vibrant. So I pulled out some clutter to place around each of the stalls to kind of signify what that person sells. So there's like a little tray of eggs on the Nungs who sell the animal products. Celestion's got, some baked goods and some bread outside his. I didn't know what to put outside the hunters, so I just put, like some empty buckets and, metal kind of colander or something like that. I don't know. And then for the Grovehursts, I put in baskets of fruit and vegetables. So here are the screenshots, and that brings me to the end of the video. I want to say thanks so much for watching this and putting up with my awful voiceover, and I will see you in another video very soon. Take care and goodbye.